Hello, racing fans. This is the NASCAR show here on the Grueling Truth where legends speak. I'm Alex Gray here with Steve Risley. We got a lot of stuff to cover here from Greg Biffle's return. We got new qualifying procedures and the schedule revamp that everyone in NASCAR has been talking about. So let's go ahead and run through some news here. Obviously, the big one is Greg Biffle. He hasn't ran a cup. He hasn't ran a race, cup race at least, since the finale in 2016. And he took some practice laps in the number 51 Kyle Busch Motorsports truck. And it has been announced, Bob Pockrass in a tweet, he said Greg Biffle will race that 51 truck at Texas in June. And he took some laps today in which Kyle Busch is running that truck for this first Texas race.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. I mean, Greg Biffle is a great ambassador for the sport, a great driver, always steady Eddie. And, it was a loss when I think he kind of involuntarily retired because he just couldn't get sponsorship, and Roush was kind of on his downside, as I take it, as I recall. Yeah. He didn't want to, but, money's important in that sport, and he wasn't putting the numbers up at the time, and Roush was struggling at the time. So it's, he's 49, which is kind of late to get back into it, but I think he has the skills and talents, and I think he'll be a welcome addition back, and hopefully what it does, it's a stepping stone for him back into the Cup Series at some point. So bully for Greg Biffle. I'm glad he's back. I'm glad he's coming back and going to try it again. That's good.
Yeah, I'm hoping he'll run some more races after that too. I think the 51 truck might have still some dates available, so maybe Greg Biffle can hop in and run the truck around a little bit and get some more opportunities and just getting a chance to race again. He could be
if you could pull Kyle Busch out of that thing. I have a feeling Kyle Busch races golf carts around the motorhome lot. I think he just takes on all little kids. You always see in the pre-race. You always see the little kids running around in little battery powered cars, and I got a feeling it wouldn't surprise me if you don't see Kyle Busch in one of those racing the little kids there too. The guy just loves to race, bless his heart, and that's why he's so good at what he does. So good for him. What about Levine Racing? This is a good thing because this is what we would call a mid-major team. Would you agree? I mean, it's kind of like an NCAA right now. You got your Power Fives, you get your mid-majors, but talk about Levine Racing and what they're planning on doing in 2020.
Yeah, so as you know, they switched to Toyota this season. They picked up Matt DiBenedetto, have a little bit of a technical alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing. Basically, Adam Stern posted here a little quote from Bob Levine on expanding to potentially 2 cars. Quote, "It's just a matter of sponsorship because we could put the people on it, and we have the organization, and Toyota Racing Development will support that. So, yes, we are looking to expand." They have driven a second car occasionally in the past, number 59, generally for something like the Daytona 500 or something like that. I could see this. If there's no ride open at Joe Gibbs Racing, I could see Christopher Bell ending up here as a temporary kind of ride until something opens up at JGR. Let's see.
Well, I think it's good to see a mid-range team have the opportunity to expand because we're getting down to, we used to always have knockout qualifying, and now we were putting 36 to 40 cars in a race depending on what the purse is and where you're racing at. But to get it back to, I don't know if we'll ever get back to 43. I think the sport's just gotten too technical and too engineering and too expensive for some of the mid-race teams. But to see a team like Levine, contemplating and desiring to put a second car in, I think it's really good for the sport. It signals that maybe the sport's making a little bit of a rebound here. And I think the schedule is going to help change that around a lot. We'll talk about the schedule here at the end of the show. But that makes me real happy for NASCAR that guys like that are willing to invest the money into the sport and add a second car and put more cars on the track so Kyle Larson can hit them.
Yeah, so he said here he said here that originally they wanted to run 2 cars this year and potentially get Daniel Suarez before he ended up with Stuart Haas. So that's interesting that Suarez potentially could have ended up with this team too, concerning the fact that he, of course, came up with the Toyota camp and Joe Gibbs Racing. So, and they said, yeah, they are working on expanding for 2020 right now. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think NASCAR is now rebounding.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I predict NASCAR will have a roaring 20s for the 2020 decade, if you will. It's going to be hard for NASCAR to get back to where they were in the 80s and 90s, but I think NASCAR will certainly start getting on the rebound here, as I think now during this time, NASCAR is just hitting the reset button. They are just hitting that reset button and re-looking at everything, which I really like. We'll talk about that. As you mentioned, the schedule. We'll talk about that too.
Well, here's a question for you, Alex. Is this a product of, we made some major driver changes. I mean, Gordon retires, Earnhardt retires, Kenseth retires. A lot of people, a lot of young drivers, William Byron, Bowman, Chase Elliott obviously is a brand name because of his dad. Bubba Watson, Bubba Wallace. I'm sorry, Bubba Watson's a golfer. I'm sorry, I was watching the golf on TV, so my bad on that one. Was it just a product maybe of there were probably a lot of unknown drivers that we're now starting to get familiar with and starting to get popular with again? Is this kind of what's causing a little bit of the resurgence in NASCAR?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible that that could be causing a resurgence. Another thing I want to bring up too, speaking of resurgence, about the Gen 7 car, that potentially NASCAR is looking at having double the manufacturers they have now in the future.
Who are they looking at? Do you know?
I don't think it lists anyone, but if I were to give a good idea, I read about it earlier this week. If I had a good list of manufacturers that could potentially join NASCAR, obviously I think a lot of people want Dodge back. Dodge, maybe Audi. Audi's a pretty big racing manufacturer. Perhaps Honda or Nissan. I could see Nissan joining. Or here's a weird one. Kia. Kia brought out the Stinger last year, and that car to me looks like a NASCAR to me. I'd like to sit. That's just a few that I think could be some front runners.
And Toyota's going to the Supra next year, right? Which is kind of more of a model line, more like the Camaro and the Mustang, correct? They're moving to the Supra next year?
It hasn't been confirmed, but judging by the Camaro and then the Mustang, I would have to assume that later this year they may announce the Supra going into the Cup Series. I'm pretty sure that's only a matter of time.
Yeah, and you don't believe everything you read on Twitter, obviously, but I had heard far-fetched reports that Ferrari was actually exploring a NASCAR car. Now, that's a wild report from no confirmed source. But think about Ferrari coming into NASCAR, how good that would be for the sport.
That'd be a little different.
Yeah, I know, wouldn't it? It'd be weird to see it, because they dominate F1 along with Mercedes. Or you really even think about Mercedes is a better option because they make enough coupes or cars that Mercedes should be the one that you would want to court to put a Mercedes car into the series. Probably more so than Ferrari. Ferrari basically makes exotic cars, but Mercedes, they've got enough C-Class, E-Class, S-Class cars that they could drop one in and rig it up to run. And I think that would be cool if they could lure Mercedes in into NASCAR. That would be good. It'd bring a whole new class of people into the sport.
It would.
Yeah, and Mercedes actually would be a lot better than Ferrari. But those are just far-fetched reports that, it's conspiracy theory right now is what I'll call them. It's always fun to talk about conspiracy theories when you can.
Of course.
What else? Let's see. But they do seem to want to bring more foreign cars in. I did hear Audi was looking at the possibility, and Audi would be good. They've got their A Series cars. They're high performance cars. It would be good to get Dodge back in because they make the Demon and the Hellcat, which are basically the two fastest production cars made in the United States.
Yeah.
So you'd think you'd want to get those cars, represented in the NASCAR. So if Dodge could get back into it, I know they've had a resurgence as an organization and a company too, and their cars are selling well again. And I know they got out of it because of funding and things of that nature. So that would be a good thing too to have Dodge back in. I think definitely need to get Dodge back in and things like that. Anything going on in the truck races? Anything there? Anything before we get into the big series? Xfinity. You want to talk about Xfinity and truck and see what's going on there? I mean, other than Biffle's coming back and going to run some truck races starting in June, which is great. Mm-hmm. It seems like, again, Busch wins every time he runs, pretty much.
Yeah, Busch is in both of those races, actually, for Xfinity and truck. Jeffrey Earnhardt, he's going to be in the Xfinity Texas race. That car, it is a Technical Alliance Joe Gibbs car, but it's the Extreme Concepts Racing team. So this is a brand-new team making their debut here, a team that's expected to run, I believe, a few more Xfinity races. He's going to drive the 81, which, fun fact, Dale Jr. drove that number in the Xfinity Series a little bit way back when. And Jeffrey is entered in the 81, and I believe that's good. What Jeffrey said on Dale Jr.'s podcast a few weeks ago, that the Extreme Concepts Racing team is planning to be a full-time Cup team next year. It just depends on getting more sponsors and everything. So look out for Jeffrey Earnhardt in that 81.
And the composite car, is that something we're going to end up seeing in NASCAR? Or are they going to try and stay true to form with the normal car parts?
I think the composite body is more of a cheaper option. So I think NASCAR may go down that road because of it. As long as it, obviously keeps the cars safe. NASCAR's done a heck of a job toward that. So yeah.
Which once again says, as Robert Duvall said in Days of Thunder, there ain't nothing stock about a stock car.
True.
There you go. Not in the good old days. Fun fact: Brendan Fraser is going to drive the pace car.
Nice.
The Mummy. So I haven't seen him in a movie in a few years. So I guess this is what he does to get his name back on the front page. But he's driving the pace car. Not that really means anything, but it's just popped up on the screen here. All right. Anything else we need to get to before we get to the schedule? Because this is the let's talk about Texas real quick. Texas real quick. What?
First off, Joe Gibbs Racing announced that they have extended their long-time relationship with Interstate Batteries and the qualifying procedures as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's go. Okay, so Interstate Batteries is staying with Joe Gibbs. Mm-hmm. And the qualifying, talk about the qualifying changes. You got to post a lap or you're going to go to the back of the pack, correct?
Yes. So you cannot. So once you leave your pit stall, you have to go make a lap. You can't just sit there at the end of pit road.
Well, I think they also said too, I believe, that once you pull out of the pits, you have to go.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go to the start line or the end of the pit road and park it. Once you get out of your pit stall, you have to get on the track and run a lap, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that at Fontana? Was that a bad thing that when they all kind of missed the last qualifying lap? I mean, I thought it was kind of funny. I mean,
It was funny and bad at the same time. It's just like, my.
Idiots. It's like idiots.
It's like, guys, just post a lap. It's okay. It doesn't matter where you start. It's where you finish. At least that's always been my belief.
I mean, should they do kind of like somewhat similar to what Formula One does, and they put the lights up on there when they start the race? It's like, here's the countdown. If you don't start a lap by the time these 5 lights go off, you're going to the back of the pack, even though you're in the top 12. I mean, should they warn the drivers and crew chiefs, or should it just be incumbent upon the drivers and crew chiefs to monitor their own time? Because I think they all tried to gauge it too close. And, they all go at the same time, and they're all trying to get their tires up to speed and warm it up, and then every one of the 12 cars misses it. So what's your thoughts on that? Should they put a light up there that says it's going to go green, it's going to go yellow, which is a warning, like you better get your butt on the track, and then when it goes red, if you haven't left, by the time that red light comes on, you're toast. That's kind of what they're doing, basically, without the lights.
Yeah, I'd say it could be an idea. Let's see how this one goes, because it's just telling. Because I just think that in that case, if you don't turn a lap, you're just sent to the back of the field. In that case, so the light thing could be.
that rule's kind of like the same thing that they did with if you get caught post-race, you fail post-race inspection, and you're a P1 penalty, then you lose the race. Instead of just, you still used to be you get credit for the win, but you lose the points or whatever. But now you lose the race and the prize money and everything that goes with it. So I think that's kind of an extension of that rule to really say, okay, we're going to be definitive here. If you don't post a lap, I don't care if you're in the top 12. You lose your pit stall, and you go to the back of the pack. And, some tracks, Martinsville, Richmond, Bristol, that'll kill you. You don't want to get in the back of the pack of those tracks. I mean, places like Daytona and Talladega, it doesn't matter too much. And probably the mile and a half, it doesn't matter that much. But you get some of these tracks, and even like Texas coming up this weekend, which is really a super speedway, you don't want to start too far back because it's hard to pass cars on that track because everybody's so fast on that track, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What else do we need to talk about before we get to the schedule? Kevin Harvick. Let's talk about Texas. Harvick's coming in with 10 straight races with top 5 finishes. He's kind of had, I wouldn't say a bad start. I mean, I think he's up there in points, but he's not really been competitive for a win. He's competitive as a top 5 car, but he's not competitive as a win. Is this his best first chance to win a race this weekend?
Yeah, Kevin Harvick to me is a favorite. He won this race in the fall 2017. Harvick obviously was crazy dominant on the 1.5 mile tracks last year. I'd say Harvick's a favorite. He'll win at some point here pretty soon.
Okay.
You look at the
and then you got Kyle Busch, who just seems to be winning everything right now.
He's on fire.
Was it fair to say Kyle Busch is probably right now the best driver in NASCAR?
Yes. Far and away.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean he gets it. What's your take on Martin Truex? I mean, he's come over to what we thought would be a better team than Furniture Row because it's JGR. Yet I don't know that he's been that competitive.
To me, it's hard.
Really, I mean, he's running up front. I mean, the Power 5 teams, or I call them Power 5 because I'm in NCAA mode right now. The big teams, he's running up front, but I haven't really seen him compete hard-nosed for a win like he was doing the last couple of years with Furniture Row. Is he just adapting to a new management system, a new crew chief? He's got the same crew chief.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed much, yeah. So what's up with Martin Truex?
I mean, it could be him switching over to a different team. It was just him at Furniture. Well, of course, 2017 he was teammates with Eric Jones, but yeah, it was just him at Furniture Row. I think also it's hard to have 4 successful, strong cars sometimes. Some teams, of course, have made it work before. Of course, Hendrick, Stewart-Haas, but balancing out the equipment too. But I think Truex will be fine. I think he'll pick up the pace later in the season and get a couple wins.
Okay, very fair. Anything else we need to talk about before we get into the schedule?
I do not think so. I'm really excited to talk about the schedule.
Here we go. Talk about it. Lead us off. I mean, you studied this probably closer than I have. I mean, it's major changes. Some are good. We're going to keep Daytona at number 1, but then we're going on a West Coast swing immediately and shucking Atlanta down to the 4th, 5th race. What's your thoughts on going west immediately?
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the West Coast races that being all in one sweep there. You got Daytona, then Las Vegas, Auto Club, ISM. One thing I probably would suggest for future seasons is potentially pushing Sonoma up there with them and make it more of a fun West Coast sweep. Plus, Sonoma will look green, and I think that'd be kind of cool. Sonoma is actually green around this time of the year, believe it or not. So,
I live in LA, and it's absolutely beautiful out here now. But we got rain. They've got these super blooms going on out here where all the hills are covered in flowers and everything, and it's actually a gorgeous setting. They're actually blocking roads out here and closing down towns because there's so many people trying to get to these super blooms out here. They literally say you can only park your car somewhere at a truck stop somewhere, and you got to bus in. They won't let, because the towns aren't big enough to handle everybody coming into these towns are holding these super blooms. But we've driven through because we live in the valley and we see them. We drive over to Pasadena where my wife worked and everything, and we see it all the time. And it's actually gorgeous. So it would be a good picturesque time to bring the cars out here. They're coming out here, though. So the West Coast Swing, so you think bringing Sonoma. When is Sonoma? Sonoma
is going to be
in June.
June 14th.
So they're going to go from Michigan to Sonoma to Chicagoland. So, yeah, it makes sense to bump. I thought it would have made sense to bump Atlanta down 1 week and put Sonoma right after Phoenix or right after Fontana because you're already out here. And keep the equipment out here. Of course, I don't know how much equipment they've got to change out because now you're going to have to bring another truck out because you're going from a 2-mile track at Fontana to a road course, and so you got to bring a whole other crew out here anyway, or a whole other trailer out here. So I don't know if that's the reason they didn't do it or not. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing I noticed with the West Coast races this year is that ISM Raceway, Phoenix, they actually left the garages open for teams to work on their cars for the next race. I know that some haulers will actually park in hotel parking lots and stuff when they're out there in the West because obviously going back from Charlotte and then it's just a pain. So I like that they do that. I think that's pretty cool. Obviously, I know they probably bring multiple cars. I'm not 100% certain how everything works, but yeah, so you got the West Coast sweep there, and then you got Atlanta, and then you got Homestead, Miami. That's right, starting in 2020, after 17 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did Miami get screwed out of this deal?
I wouldn't say they got screwed. I would say this is just a change. NASCAR is willing to try here. Homestead, Miami. Of course, Ford is also, this is the last year Ford's going to sponsor their races and the championship weekend and everything. So they've done this for 17 years, too. Homestead's been home. Of course, before then, it was always Atlanta for the longest time. I don't know if Homestead necessarily got screwed out of this. It's certainly a little different. It's going to be different with Homestead actually being way earlier in the season than it being the last. So we'll wait and see how that works out with Homestead. Obviously, it's a fun track to go to for sure. It might lose some of its specialty with it no longer being the home to the championship weekend.
Yeah, and then you've got Bristol and Richmond, so you've got back-to-back short tracks. So there's going to be a lot of banging and bump. Then you got Bristol, Richmond, and Talladega. So you now have the extreme ends of NASCAR. You've got the super speedway with restrictor plate racing or whatever the new form is. I think the spacer racing, whatever they're going to call it now. But then you've got two short tracks in Bristol and Richmond. And that's kind of that's between April. That's pretty much dominates April. That kind of becomes the meat of the season there, and a lot of things can happen. There'd be a lot of weird things going on because short track is always crazy.
And then you got Talladega after that.
You got Talladega, which is a crapshoot. So what about those? Is that a good move? I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. I think, and plus, it's all kind of in one little region: Tennessee, Virginia, and then Alabama. So I like what they did there. So, actually,
and then they get shot up to Dover, Delaware. Then they come right back to Martinsville. So you got in 5 races, you got 3 short tracks in Talladega. Is it good to bunch all the short tracks up that much?
Yeah, I like it. It gives a little fun part of the schedule there.
Yeah, but I kind of like the spacing out. Let me see. Well, they're going back to Dover. Okay, all right. Then you've got the World 600. That's going to stay the same on Memorial Day, same day as the Indy 500, correct?
Yeah, that's just the race you wouldn't touch.
Yeah, no, they're not going to touch that one. Then you go to Kansas, 1.5 miles.
Michigan.
And then Michigan, which is a fast track. It's basically a super speedway. It's kind of like Texas, really. Then you got your first road course doesn't come up until Sonoma, correct? June 14th?
Yeah, Sonoma's running June 14th. And then you got Chicagoland. And then this is interesting because IndyCar does this too.
Talk about Chicagoland because weren't they the start of the chase or the playoffs? Weren't they the first race in the playoffs every year?
Yeah, up until 2017 was the last year for that. They used to host the start of the playoffs. And then they got pushed to July, and, of course, last year's race was hot as heck. So I wonder if that might have played a factor into pushing this Chicagoland race into June, only by like a week or two, but still.
Yeah.
Interesting there.
All right. Now talk about June 27th and June 28th. Pocono back-to-back.
Yep, they're gonna run a double header. Now, IndyCar does this at Detroit Belle Isle.
Yeah,
they run.
Yeah, I love that. I love that weekend. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and there's going to be 5 races ran that Pocono weekend. ARCA, Truck, Xfinity, and the 2 Cup races. I bet you Kyle Busch runs all 5 of those. He's
I'm not going to bet against you on that one. Yeah. We need Bobby Sheridan online to do that one, to predict those.
And I tell you what, if he wins all 5 of them, I wouldn't even be mad. You wouldn't.
Okay, but so what are do we know what the parameters of the races are? Are they going to be 2 400-mile races or 300-mile races? Or what are they going to do?
I think they're both going to be 400-mile races like they are now. And even though Pocono they have an infield road course as well.
Well, and that was a question I had for you. 2 things. One is Pocono generally, as I recall, is fairly tough on the brakes and equipment on that track. Is that a fair assessment? As I recall, I remember Gordon hitting the wall hard because his brakes failed. You know, that tri-oval thing that's set up, they come through there. And no corners the same there. And that's a track that's pretty tough on equipment. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, Pocono has had some memorable incidents there with wrecks, like Elliott Sadler, engine ripped out of his car back in 2010, Steve Park back in 2002, Jeff Gordon 2006. Bubba Wallace last year had a similar brake issue. And so, yeah, I think Pocono's very tough on equipment, especially you're going down that front straight. And plus, that's why they call it the tricky triangle. You know, it's the 3 turns are all different based off of different tracks. And, you know, turn 2, a lot less banking than turn 1. You know, it's Pocono is certainly an interesting track.
Okay, so here's my question for you. Why wouldn't – I think I know the obvious answer, but why wouldn't they run – because Pocono does have a road course built into the infield, correct?
Yeah.
All right, why wouldn't they run a one-day road course and the next day a oval course? Is it because of just hauling so much equipment out there?
It could be. It could be how long it'll take to set everything up to.
And so are you going to see teams take, like, 3 cars out there now instead of 2? Because, you know, you wreck your car on Saturday, you're down to 1 car on Sunday.
That's a possibility. I can see teams hauling out about 3 or 4 cars.
Yeah, and then how have they discussed yet how they're going to set up the qualifying for each race? Because I think IndyCar doesn't the second day qualifying based on the first day in Belle Island, the second day racing lineup based on first day results. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So have they made any discussion on that as to how NASCAR is going to do that, or have they even gotten that far down the road yet?
I know Bob Pockra said, I can't say I know 100% the exact error rules in qualifying for 2019 races as rule package evolves. So race lengths are currently TBD as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really it's basically how they if they do it like Indy does at Belle Island, it's basically how you finish. I think that's how you start the second race the next day. Is if you know they start you based on your finishing spots, and your first race becomes a qualifier for the second race, as I recall. And I'm not 110% sure on that. I'm about 95% sure on that. So Pocono, interesting experiment. So that's their only trip to Pocono now. So they're only going up into the Pocono Mountains one time this year, correct? In 2020.
Yep. So
all right, and then we get down into what I think is the weakest part of the move they made was Indianapolis on July 5th.
Yeah, this one was probably the most shocking move that NASCAR made here. They decided to move the traditional Coke 0400 race at Daytona to the last race of the regular season. Now,
which I love, and we'll get to that. I love that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, I get that. That's interesting. But Indianapolis, I'll be honest here.
It's a bad track. it's a bad track for NASCAR.
I think, it's sadly Indianapolis just hasn't produced good racing. I don't think it was ever built for NASCAR, really.
No, it's too flat. Track's too flat. Only got 9-degree banking in the turns. Too long of straightaways, and it becomes. I lived in Indianapolis all of my life until 2 years ago, and I moved out west to California, and I had been to pretty much as many IndyCar races as I could. I'd been the original Brickyard 400 when Gordon won in '94. And been all the way through, and I've been to the F1 races. That track is just not set up for cars that heavy that can't run flat out, and it becomes a parade. I know the one year they had the tire problem out there, where guys had to sit every 6 or 7 laps and change tires, or they were blowing the tires up, and it got really silly. So the only thing I can say is, if anybody can put on a show similar to what Daytona does on the Firecracker 400, it would be Indianapolis. They get it right. They know how to put on a show. I'm sure there'll be a big band up there. It'll be a big, glorious weekend. The fireworks and everything display going on.
I think this is.
So, go ahead.
I think this is NASCAR trying to make the Brickyard 400 more exciting again. Try and get people to come back, because attendance has been just dying at that track. One suggestion I had was, is it possible to maybe try the road course at some point instead of the oval track to see if that could spark up anything for the NASCAR races?
Well, I know you and I talked about this off air. I almost thought Indianapolis was a better choice than Pocono for the doubleheader, because they have a solid, F1 approved road course in the middle of that infield. It's 2.5 miles. It's huge. And it might have been better to bolster attendance and things like that. Say we're going to run a road course race here, then we're going to run the Brickyard 400. But I think that NASCAR is doing all they can. They don't want to give up the prestige of racing at IMS,
right,
the Amsoil Speedway. They don't, because that's still one of their 3 or 4 biggest races of the year, just by the prestige of being at IMS. But the racing there is not good. It's a boring race to watch, and I thought if I was going to do a doubleheader, I might have taken it to Indianapolis. Now, I don't know if the road course is set up wide enough for the NASCAR boys or not to run on the road course through the infield. The F1 cars and the Indy cars are smaller cars. They don't take up as much space, so it's a little easier to do. But I would have thought I would have explored that option more than I would have before I went to Pocono. But, I'm not Mike Helton. I'm not, Jim France or anybody like that. I don't make those decisions. But interesting choice. But I think they're just trying to – I agree with you. Attendance has been dropping in Indianapolis like crazy. August again in Indianapolis is brutal. The only thing higher than the temperature in Indianapolis that time of year, and you're in Kentucky, so is the humidity. So you go out to those tracks, and it's brutal. And August was a really terrible time. I don't know if I wouldn't have almost just thrown Indianapolis into the chase. Really, if you wanted to up the prestige of Indianapolis and keep that track, thrown it into the last 10 races and said, okay, we're going to run one race here and do that. But we'll give it a try. Then we go to your favorite track. We're back in Kentucky. Has Kentucky always only had one date, just July 11th?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's the one day Kentucky's always had, is around this time.
Yeah, and then you go to New Hampshire, and then back to Michigan, which is Penske's home, so they're going to keep him happy. And Watkins Glen. So that's only the second road course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is Watkins Glen?
Yep.
Okay. So, and we still now in the playoffs. But here's a good one. I think is great. And tell me what you think of this. I love the fact that the last regular season race, which is the last chance to dance, is Daytona. What do you think? I think that's great. What do you think?
The more I think about it, the more I believe that this is a way of, for people to get into this is the last chance to get into the playoffs. And I think this is potentially a really good track to do it at, because Daytona is just so unpredictable. We all know it's a crapshoot. We could get an occasional surprise winner like Trevor Bayne in 2011 or David Reagan that same year. So, that's an interesting move by NASCAR. I kind of like it. and I'm looking forward to see how that nets out, how they're going to move that Daytona race to the end of August instead of it being the 4th of July weekend like it always has been.
Well, I'm sorry to see it lose the 4th of July. I mean, the Firecracker 400 has always been a great race.
Yeah,
always come to watch that race on that weekend, and I think of a little E winning there. The first time he got back after his dad passed away.
Yeah.
In February of that year, and the major win he had there. But for NASCAR itself, I mean, I think it's to me it's like it's a wild card race because anybody can win. That's the track where anybody. I mean, Chris Buescher, Michael Arnett. I mean, the guys that don't normally you don't contend. They can just be at the right place at the right time, and they win themselves into the chase on the last race, and I think, is that probably why they made that move?
Yeah, I think that's probably why they did.
Yeah, I mean, you got guys like Chase Elliott who, and until last year hadn't won his way into a race. He'd pointed his way in, but anybody can win at Daytona. That's the one track in Talladega where, man, it doesn't matter until the last 20 laps of the race, and then you just got to be in the right place at the right time and avoid the big one and go. But hopefully what you'll see is somebody unknown or unheralded, win themselves into the chase, and I think that's what NASCAR was kind of hoping for or looking for at that point in time.
Yeah.
I would guess. All right, so then we go down to the playoffs. Darlington gets moved into the playoffs now. I love that. I
love this first round, honestly.
You what?
Darlington. I love this first round. Darlington, Richmond, and Bristol.
Bristol. This is short track. This is NASCAR. This is the heart of NASCAR right here. These tracks are the heart of NASCAR right here. This is what the sport was founded on, were these short tracks, Saturday night short track racing, and I think this is great. But the only thing it tells me is it kind of, there are good short track drivers and there are not good short track drivers. Is it too one-sided that it's only going to favor one style of driving? That to have, really, I consider Darlington a short track in its own right because it races like a short track, even though I think it's a mile and a half, isn't it? Or a mile and a quarter. I think it's a mile and a quarter.
Yeah, I think these short tracks can benefit certain drivers, like guys like Kyle Larson, who have obviously grew up racing on the dirt tracks. But I think when you add in the beat and banging and everything, I've seen Martinsville and Bristol get crazy sometimes. So I think these short tracks can provide some really good racing.
But if you look at it here, okay, so it's going to be great short track racing. I think it favors one style of driving, which I don't know that I want all three races to favor one style. I kind of like some diversity in that, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun because those are all great racetracks. Then you go to Vegas, Talladega, and Charlotte, which we consider super speedways. So now you've basically flipped the tables entirely and taken it to – go ahead.
Yeah, we know Talladega is the wild card. Remember, Charlotte, that's the Roval now. So I like that the second round ends with the Roval because we saw how last year's race went down for the first time they did it. That was insane. So
avoid Jimmy Johnson. Avoid Jimmy. Where's the 48 car? Get away from him.
Ouch.
He's going to wreck you. Yeah. So, but now you've all of a sudden you've got Vegas and Talladega, which is, and then you've got the Roval. So, and basically, I guess we would consider the Roval kind of a road course race, right?
Yeah.
So we have finally thrown a road course into the schedule for the playoffs.
Yeah, and not to mention, this is basically the reason why there are no new tracks is because NASCAR has a current contract that ends after next year with the current tracks. So this is this first step towards 2021 when we can see some potential new tracks and even a bigger shakeup in the schedule.
Okay. Yeah, and I heard Nashville's talking about trying to get back online and trying to put a race in Nashville. Yeah, they're trying to put are they going back with the Xfinity, or are they going to try and put a Cup race in Nashville?
According to Bob Pockrass, Marcus Smith said in January that the earliest any NASCAR National Series event could come to Nashville with the Speedway Motorsports Incorporated involvement is 2021. So they may look to get the Xfinity or trucks there, and maybe perhaps the Cup Series at some point.
Well, and it's a city that probably deserves some attention from NASCAR. But, you know, and then we go to the round of 8. Kansas, Kansas has 2 races, so they're still in 2. Then you go back to Texas, and then you end up at Martinsville. So you get hot dogs, you get the Martinsville hot dog, and you get short track racing to determine who's going to go to the Final Four. You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, I'm looking at it. Is Kansas really only what I would call the true? It's only the real true what I would call mile-and-a-half track. I guess you would call Vegas a mile and a half, but really, you know, they took Chicagoland out, or I think it's been out for a while, but Kansas really is the only true mile-and-a-half track. Texas is a mile and a half, but it's a super speedway because of the banking. Las Vegas is kind of the same way. So really, you've narrowed that down, and they're definitely putting an emphasis on short track racing here, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's something the fans really want. The fans really want to see more short tracks on the schedule.
And then talk about the finish in Phoenix. Is that good or bad? I don't know. I don't know about Phoenix. I mean, I don't see that as the heart of NASCAR.
This one was a little interesting. Now, Steve O'Donnell did hint in the future about rotating the season finale as well. But I think for at least this year and probably the next few, ISM Raceway is going to host the season finale. I'm kind of surprised they wanted to put it out at Phoenix, but then again, the track had a big renovation. They completely reconfigured the track, so that's probably why they want to push that at ISM Raceway. I actually made a comment and said I wouldn't mind the season ending at Bristol.
Well, I always thought, my opinion is the season should start at Daytona and end at Daytona, was always my thought. Mm-hmm. You know, you start it there and you end it there. And I know Daytona, because it's what we used to call a restrictor plate track, it's a crapshoot. But basically, what you had at Miami for so many years was everybody getting out of the way of the top 4 cars and just kind of running up out of the groove and letting the top 4 cars duel it out. It's almost like I felt, why don't you just take everybody else off the track and just put the top 4 cars on and let them duel it out? Because it's a parade. It's a parade track basically, and nobody wanted to be the one to wreck one of the top 4 cars. Everybody got out of their way. But Daytona, if you start at Daytona and you end at Daytona, you know, that's just a crapshoot. And I think that would have been the most fun. But I did read that too, like you said, that alternate the endings every year. Find a different track to end on. One year make it a short track, one year make it a super speedway, one year make it a mile and a half, you know, one year make it Charlotte, and just alternate, because each track favors certain drivers or certain driving skills or certain teams who are good at everything. And I think it opens up more fair balance into giving teams a chance to win. Like you ended up at Daytona, and maybe you got an RCR car, which is very good at super speedways. If they can get themselves in the hunt, they all of a sudden have a great chance to win. The way you got it right now, you got only certain teams that run good on certain tracks. And you've got the Power 5 for the teams that run good everywhere because they've got enough equipment and money to buy the equipment. But, yeah, interesting. But Phoenix and Indy were the 2 biggest things that made me raise my eyebrows. Well, Indy in July, I don't know. Phoenix to end the season on, it's not really I don't consider Phoenix a track that I would want to finalize my season on. But we'll see what happens. I mean, it's a competitive track. It's, a mile track, I think, isn't it? And then a mile track?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to have some rubbing and racing and banging and buffing, and there's always a good fight coming out of that track somewhere. But overall, your impressions of the schedule?
I praise NASCAR so much for wanting to make these changes to the schedule. Mainly, I'm pretty excited about all the changes. I'm looking forward to see how the racing will fall out in 2020. NASCAR, I love it. I'm intrigued with, of course, Indy being in the July 4th weekend, but still, love it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my dogs are going nuts. I think the mail person just came by, so I apologize.
The dogs are probably excited too.
They're excited too about it. Okay, so and all the drivers that I've followed on, I follow on Twitter, many of the drivers, they all are very pleased with the changes made. Who got screwed out of this deal? Who got the worst screw?
Who got the worst screw? Maybe Homestead Miami. Just that, they kind of lose that flair they had about hosting the season finale. They kind of lose that flair. So the race may not be as interesting as it once was, but we'll have to wait and see.
And you say Ford is going to continue to do the final race of the year?
I do not know, actually.
We don't know that for sure yet?
Yeah, I know they won't be sponsoring the Homestead race after this year. Yeah.
Maybe that's why they pulled it out, because maybe Ford had already said they weren't going to do it. We don't know. Answers that questions. Anything else we want to cover? I mean, schedule looks great. It's going to get going on right now. Anything right now, this going on, any surprises? Jimmy Johnson continues to be extremely mediocre. Is that the biggest news right now?
Actually, Bob Pockris also posted this yesterday. NASCAR is going to increase the size of the rear spoiler to 9 inches and a 1-inch bolt. Yeah, for the track bar mount for high to 12 inches for Daytona and Talladega. This is to slow the cars down after the speeds were too high during a Daytona test in February.
I mean, is that good or bad? You slow them down. I mean, you're just punching them up more.
Hard to say. Brian Keselowski believes we're going to see the return of two-car tandem drafting. So, honestly, we're not going to know until it actually happens.
Yeah, we got Daytona. We got Talladega coming up in a few weeks, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's always a fun one. Everybody loves Talladega, 2.6 miles. So that'll be good. Anything else we need to cover?
I think that's about everything.
Who are you picking?
My pick for Texas. You know what? I'll go with Kevin Harvick. I'll go with Harvick to win this one.
God dang it. I can't bet with you. I was going to pick Harvick, but I'm going to go with Kyle Busch. Oh, okay. Chase Elliott looks strong. Finally, a Chevy ran strong in a race. But it's a short track where, yeah.
Yeah, Martinsville was a good step.
Yeah, it's a good step, but I still think the Chevys are tremendously lagging in aero and not getting done what they need to get done and be competitive on the super speedways. We'll see what happens. I don't know, but, yeah, I would say Harvick. I'll go with Kyle Busch just to bet against you. How's that?
All righty.
All right?
Sounds good.
Wrap it up. Close us out.
All righty. So, new changes on the horizon in NASCAR as they continue. And with that, we get ready for Texas. Thank you guys so much for listening to the NASCAR show right here on the Grueling Truth Where Legends Speak. From Steve Risley and myself, Alex Gray, signing off.